The day Lorraine moved in, I knew my peace was over. She arrived with 4 suitcases, 2 boxes of vitamins, and a passive-aggressive smile that made my spine itch. "It's just for a few weeks," Stephanie had said. "She's not doing well. She needs help." That was 3 months ago. I'd always had an uneasy truce with my mother-in-law. She thought I was too quiet, too old-fashioned, too grounded, maybe. She was the type who made herself heard in any room and didn't trust people who didn't overshare. But I tolerated her for Stephanie's sake. I'd been married to her daughter for 10 years, and I figured that earned me the right to some privacy in my own house. But that's the thing about people like Lorraine. Once they're inside, they rearrange things, not just the furniture, but the dynamics, the air. Suddenly, Stephanie was agreeing with her more than with me. I was too stubborn or set in my ways. Dinner conversations shifted from shared jokes to critiques, subtle at first, then sharpened. I'd walk into a room and they'd go quiet, like teenagers hiding secrets. At first, I brushed it off. I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the stress of Lorraine being here was just fraying my nerves. But then Stephanie started spending more time out. Not at work. She worked remotely, but on errands, appointments, and vague coffee meetings. Her phone was suddenly locked. Her smiles were hollow. She started sleeping in the guest room because of Lorraine's coughing. I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but I've learned to read the space between words. And Stephanie's spaces were getting wider and colder by the day. Then came the comment from Lorraine that tipped it all. "You know, Frank, not everyone can hold on to a house forever. Times change. People change." I looked up from my coffee. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing. Just saying it's smart to prepare for transitions." I didn't reply, but something inside me clicked into place. I began to watch. Not just them, but the paper trail. I checked our shared files, the emails, the browser history on the iPad she always forgot to clear. It didn't take long. There were listings, real estate listings. Stephanie had been browsing 2-bedroom condos near downtown. She had an appointment booked with a realtor. Not just any realtor, Jason McCall. I knew the name. He was in his late 30s, smooth-talking, flashy, and not exactly subtle. I'd met him once at a charity mixer years ago. Didn't like the way he looked at my wife back then. Now it made sense. But what really got me was the message I found. "Once we move you in, we can finally do this right," he'd written. And her reply, "I'm ready. Just need to finish the exit plan." Mom's helping. Exit plan. I stared at that phrase for a long time. They weren't just cheating. They were strategizing, coordinating, plotting how to cut me out of my own home, the one my father had left me. I had made the mistake of adding Stephanie to the utility accounts and letting her co-sign some paperwork when we refinanced. She didn't own the house, but she was laying groundwork, trying to act like she had a claim. It was like watching termites. Quiet, hidden, destructive. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That's not how you deal with termites. You don't scream at the wall. You quietly call the exterminator. I called my lawyer. Ethan, my nephew, was the closest thing I had to a son. Smart kid, always respectful, and working his way up in real estate law. I asked him to meet me after hours, no paper trail. Over burgers and beer in the back of a quiet bar, I told him everything. Showed him the messages, the listings, the patterns. He didn't blink. "Uncle Frank, let's secure this." Within a week, the deed was transferred. I gifted the house to Ethan under a living trust, with stipulations that I remain a resident with full rights. It was airtight, legally invisible unless challenged, and even then, bulletproof. I also moved my savings. Quietly, cleanly. The accounts we shared were drained, my half withdrawn, and stored in a new credit union under my name only. I left hers intact, let her think nothing had changed. Then I waited. The days that followed were a test in patience. Stephanie was still running errands. Lorraine started floating ideas about updating the kitchen for resale value. She slipped one morning. I nodded, sipped my coffee, and let her talk. It was a strange feeling, knowing everything but acting like I didn't. Like watching a bad play when you already know the ending, but you stay in your seat for the full effect. One night, I followed Stephanie. She wasn't careful, never thought she had to be. I saw them through the windshield of my truck, parked just far enough away. Her and Jason, in his luxury sedan, laughing. He leaned over and kissed her. Not a casual kiss, a familiar one. A kiss with history. And she smiled. The next morning, I made pancakes. She blinked at me across the table, confused. You're in a good mood. Just appreciating what I've got, I said. While I've got it. She smiled back, guarded. She didn't know. Not yet. But she would. Soon. And when the time came, I'd be ready. The morning I knew the script would flip, Stephanie asked if we could talk. That's how it always starts, the calm before the betrayal. She waited until Lorraine had gone out for her walk around the neighborhood, which I suspected was just her way of letting Stephanie do the dirty work without a witness. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, where a week earlier I'd made pancakes like nothing was wrong. She folded her hands and lowered her voice, like she was the reasonable one. Frank, I've been doing a lot of thinking, she started, and I feel like we've been growing apart. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. That's important in moments like this. Let the performance play out. You're a good man, she continued, but we've changed. We're different people than we were when we got married. And I think we'd both be happier if we had some space. I'm not saying this to hurt you. No, of course not. Just to evict me from my life. I've been looking at places. Just to get a feel for what's out there, she said, like it was spontaneous, like I hadn't already seen the listings. And Mom agrees that a change might be good for everyone. There it was. She said it so gently, like she was offering me the last cookie in a box, while hiding the rest behind her back. I leaned back in my chair, nodded slowly. I see, I said. And what exactly are you thinking? Well, she said, drawing the word out like a breath. Maybe we can work something out where you move into a smaller place. Something easier to maintain. And I stay here. You always said you didn't like the upkeep. I could take over the payments. Eventually, maybe refinance in my name. There it was, clear as glass. They weren't just trying to leave me. They wanted the house. The house my father built. The house I grew up in. The one they had spent the last few months trying to turn against me, repaint in their colors. And Jason? I asked softly. She blinked, her mouth opening just a little. She wasn't expecting that. Not yet. Jason who? I tilted my head. Jason McCall. The man you've been seeing. The one who said you'd be moving in with him once the exit plan was done. Her jaw set. That smile, the practiced one, the PR smile she used at neighborhood events, vanished. You've been spying on me? No, I said. You left breadcrumbs. I just followed them. Silence stretched across the table like a cold sheet. I can explain, she began. No need, I said, standing. I just wanted to hear it from you. Now I have. She scrambled then, shifted tones, pleading. Frank, don't make this ugly. We can still separate like adults. I almost laughed. Adults. As if conspiring behind my back, using her mother as an emotional crowbar and planning to hand over my home to another man was the act of a mature woman. Stephanie, I said, you already made it ugly. I'm just cleaning up. I left the kitchen without another word. She followed me, asking where I was going. I didn't answer. That evening, I met with Ethan. We double-checked everything. Deed filed, trust sealed, all documents notarized. I'd even written a statement, sealed in an envelope, just in case anything legal tried to come up later. Stephanie had no idea she was now squatting in a house that legally belonged to someone else. And I wasn't going to tell her. Not yet. Let her make the move. 2 days later, Lorraine struck. She stormed into the living room, waving a printout of a Zillow listing I'd looked at weeks earlier, purely out of curiosity. So, she said, you're thinking of selling behind our backs. I looked up from my book. Selling what? The house. You mean the house that doesn't legally belong to me anymore? That stopped her cold. Stephanie walked in just in time to hear that last part. What do you mean? I stood, walked over to the fireplace, and pulled out a folder. I handed it to Stephanie without a word. Inside, the gift deed to Ethan, the trust paperwork, the full list of stipulations. You gave it away? She stammered. Not gave. Protected. You made it clear this place didn't feel like mine anymore. So I made sure it wouldn't be yours either. Lorraine turned red. That's not fair. Neither is using someone for a decade, then plotting behind their back. Stephanie's voice was a whisper. Frank, we can fix this. I got carried away. It was just talk. I wasn't thinking clearly. Then it's good I was, I said. They argued. They cried. Lorraine screamed. Stephanie tried every angle. Denial, guilt, promises, even threats. I didn't flinch. I had no more emotion to give them. I'd spent it all in silence. That weekend, I packed. I didn't leave town. Just moved to a modest rental, quiet and clean, where I could read in peace and listen to music that didn't remind me of lies. Ethan offered me a room in his place, but I declined. I needed space. Freedom, yes, but more than that, clarity. Weeks passed. Jason ghosted Stephanie. Apparently, she'd caused too much chaos, and his reputation couldn't afford her baggage. Lorraine, realizing her daughter had no assets to inherit, moved out. Stephanie called me once. Left a voicemail. She sounded tired, hollow. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, she said. I never called her back. I see them sometimes, at the grocery store, at the post office. Stephanie looks older. Not physically, but something behind the eyes. Like someone who's still waiting for a moment that's already passed. Lorraine pretends not to notice me. But I notice everything. I'd always thought of myself as a background man. The type who didn't make waves, didn't chase drama. I liked the rhythm of everyday life. Morning coffee, crossword puzzles, fixing things with my hands. For most of our marriage, I believed Stephanie appreciated that. Or maybe I just wanted to believe it. After I moved out, I realized how much of myself I'd given up in that house. Not just physical space, but voice, agency, purpose. The more I distanced myself, the clearer it all became. The subtle manipulation. The way Stephanie always framed things as our decision, when in reality, it was her plan, her mother's pressure, and my compliance. Ethan helped me settle into the rental. He even brought over a few things I hadn't packed. Tools, old photo albums, a box of my father's war memorabilia that had been shoved in the back of the garage. We sat on the porch with beers one evening, and he asked, "What are you going to do now?" I shrugged. "Start over, I guess." He smiled. "You already did." I started filling my days with small projects. I fixed up a neighbor's fence, helped a local church rewire their sound system. People around town started calling me the quiet guy who can fix anything. I didn't mind. It beat being the guy everyone whispered about. You hear what happened with Frank Daly and his wife. Still, I kept an eye on things from a distance. I heard through a friend at the planning commission that Jason McCall had pulled his name from a proposed condo deal. Word was, one of his partners had grown nervous about his personal associations. That little detail made me smile. One afternoon, I drove past my old house. The yard was overgrown. The porch light was out. The house looked abandoned somehow, like it had gone hollow. I parked half a block away and watched for a bit. Stephanie wasn't home. Lorraine's car was gone. I didn't miss the house itself. I missed the idea of it, the version I'd built in my mind, the future I thought I had. A few days later, Stephanie called again. I let it go to voicemail. "Frank, I know you probably hate me, and maybe I deserve that, but I want to talk. Just talk. Please." I didn't answer, but I saved the message. She sent an email next. More formal, carefully worded. "Frank, I've had some time to think. A lot of time, actually. I know what I did was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I would appreciate a chance to explain, face to face. No expectations. Stephanie." That same evening, Lorraine left me a voicemail too. A bitter one. "You think you're so clever, don't you? But you've just ruined everything. For Stephanie. For yourself. No one wins in the end." I played that message 3 times, each time with less emotion. The third time, I laughed out loud. No one wins. No, just the ones who stop playing by rigged rules. I didn't reply to either of them. A week later, I ran into Jason. Not intentionally. I was leaving a hardware store when I saw him coming out of a coffee shop. He looked thinner, more anxious than I remembered. We locked eyes for a second. He recognized me, but didn't say a word. He got in his car and drove off, fast. I took my time walking to my truck. People think revenge is loud. Fireworks. Shouting. Confrontation. But the best kind is silent. It's knowing things. It's moving pieces in ways no one sees until the board has changed entirely. I never touched Jason. Never spoke a word to him. But I knew people. I made calls. Quiet ones. Told the right stories to the right ears. It was enough. Stephanie eventually showed up at my door. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'd been working on a wooden bench for the community garden. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a second, I didn't recognize her. She looked like a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. Makeup-free, worn out, eyes rimmed with tiredness. "Hi," she said. "Stephanie, can I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. I didn't invite her to sit. She stood near the doorway, twisting her hands. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "For everything." I waited. She looked around the modest place. "It's nice. Peaceful. That's the idea." "I was stupid," she admitted. "Jason's gone. Mom's gone. I've been trying to book gigs again, but people aren't calling back. I think word got around. I said nothing. She looked at me, like she expected comfort, sympathy, rescue. Instead, I said, actions have ripples. She blinked. Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. But I don't trust you. And I don't miss the version of me I was around you. Silence again. Then she whispered, I thought you'd fight for me. I did, I said. Before you made it a war. She nodded, slowly. There was nothing left to say. She left. I didn't watch her walk away. Sometimes, the end isn't a bang or a breakdown. Sometimes, it's just a closed door and a quiet house. The thing about living alone again is that the silence can either be your enemy or your ally. In my case, it became a comfort. The creaks in the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant barking of a neighbor's dog, none of it unsettled me. I welcomed the stillness. It was honest. Unlike the kind of quiet I'd lived within that house, where every unspoken word was a crack waiting to split open the foundation. Ethan visited often. He brought over dinner sometimes, or just stopped in for a beer after work. He asked about Stephanie, about Lorraine, about whether I'd heard anything new. I told him I didn't ask and didn't care. That was partly true. I didn't need updates to know how things were unraveling. One evening, we sat out back, watching the sun dip below the trees. I told him about Jason, how I'd seen him slinking around, how the man had lost that confident swagger. Ethan laughed, shook his head. They always think they're untouchable, until someone like you shows up and reminds them they're not. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't the kind that needed parades. It was measured, efficient, and it was working. Stephanie's music career, what little there was of it, was dead on arrival. I had friends in venues, people who booked acts, others who managed studios. I never said outright, blacklist her. I just told the truth when asked. Told it calmly. Told it once. That was enough. Her reputation turned from up-and-coming singer-songwriter to high-maintenance, unreliable drama magnet. She tried to pivot to teaching music lessons, but her social media presence didn't help. A few old photos with Jason resurfaced, one she hadn't scrubbed properly. In one, they were hugging in front of what appeared to be my father's fireplace, the same one she pretended to despise. It didn't take long for followers to connect dots. Comments popped up, then disappeared. Then her page went dark altogether. I knew she was spiraling when I got a letter in the mail. A real, handwritten one. No return address, but I recognized her looping script immediately. She apologized again. Told me she missed the way I used to play guitar in the evenings. Said she dreamed of starting over with me, somewhere quiet. Said she'd changed. The part that struck me wasn't the apology, it was the timing. The woman who once mocked my low ambitions now wanted peace, stillness, simplicity. And she only wanted it after burning everything else down. I didn't write back. A week later, Lorraine showed up at Ethan's door. I wasn't there, but he called me immediately after. She came looking for you, he said, amused. Tried to play the concerned mother-in-law bit. Said she just wanted to check on you, but she asked more questions about your finances than your health. I chuckled, still trying to sniff out whatever scraps she can get. Pretty much, Ethan said. I told her you were busy. Then I walked her back to her car and watched until she drove off. The fact that she'd gone to Ethan instead of me told me everything I needed to know. She didn't want reconciliation, she wanted information. Wanted to know if there was still something to take. I didn't hear from either of them for a while after that. Then came the letter from the county. A routine notification about property taxes, except it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Ethan, care of my old address. It was a small but satisfying reminder that no matter what stories Stephanie might have spun to friends, to neighbors, or even to herself, the truth was written in county records. She lived in a house she didn't own, one that had legally slipped through her fingers while she planned her betrayal. I drove past the house again a few weeks later. The porch was cluttered with boxes, dead plants, and what looked like a broken lamp. A for rent sign was staked in the yard, but it was old, weather-worn. Either they'd given up trying or no one was biting. Maybe both. I didn't stop, just kept driving. That night, I sat down with my guitar for the first time in months. The strings were a little dusty, the tuning off. But once I started, it all came back. Chords, calluses, the rhythm of something honest. I played until my fingers ached. Played until the sun rose. The next morning, I called an old friend of mine, a studio engineer named Will, who owed me a favor. I told him I had a few songs I wanted to record. He asked if it was for anyone. I said no, just for me. But that was a lie. It was for the man I used to be. The one who gave too much and demanded too little. The one who let a woman and her mother turn his home into a prison. The one who forgot that silence wasn't always peace. Recording was cathartic. The songs weren't masterpieces, just stories set to chords. But they were real. Will like them. Said he hadn't heard me play with that kind of fire since the late 90s. He asked if I wanted to do a live set. I laughed. Too old for that scene. But the idea stuck in my head. A few weeks later, I agreed to a low-key gig at a local bar. Just a few songs. Nothing flashy. The crowd was small, mostly regulars. I played under a pseudonym. No one recognized me. But the applause at the end felt better than anything I'd felt in that house in years. After the set, a woman approached me. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, no nonsense. She introduced herself as the manager of another venue across town. Asked if I'd be interested in doing a set there. Said she liked the way I told stories. I told her I'd think about it. As I packed up, I thought about Stephanie again. Wondered if she'd be scrolling through her phone that night. Wondering why the music world seemed so closed off now. Wondered if she'd ever realize how much she'd had in front of her, and how quickly she'd thrown it away. I didn't feel sorry for her. I just felt clear. The offer from the bar manager sat with me for a few days. I wasn't trying to become some late-blooming performer, but I also wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. For so long, I had been a man in the background. Helpful, reliable, quiet. Now, for the first time in years, I wanted my own voice to fill a room. Not Stephanie's, not Lorraine's, not Jason's. Mine. I called the manager back and said yes. The next show was on a Friday. I kept it simple. Just me, a stool, and my old acoustic. The room wasn't packed, but it didn't need to be. The folks who were there listened. Really listened. And when I played a song called Nails in the Floorboards, which was about the slow, quiet rot of a bad marriage, a woman in the front row wiped a tear from her cheek. That did something to me. Not pride. Something quieter. Validation. After the show, a few people stopped to thank me for the music. A couple even asked where they could hear more. One man offered to buy me a drink. I declined and went home. But I slept better that night than I had in years. That weekend, I got a message I didn't expect. Stephanie. She'd found out about the show somehow. Maybe someone had tagged the bar on social media. Maybe she had spies. Or maybe fate just liked a dramatic twist. She said she wanted to meet. Not to ask for anything, just to talk. I didn't answer right away. I read the message 3 times. Then I deleted it. But a few days later, I saw her. She showed up outside the bar before my next gig. Standing across the street, arms crossed, watching. I didn't acknowledge her. I went inside, did the show. When I came back out, she was gone. The next day, she called. I answered. Frank, she said, sounding almost like the woman I married. Please don't hang up. I didn't. I didn't speak either. I just wanted to say I saw you. I listened. You're good. Silence again. I messed everything up, she added. I let the silence hang until it turned into something heavy. She continued, Jason's gone. He left when the gigs stopped coming in. Mom moved back in with her sister. And I don't even know who I am anymore. I finally spoke. That makes 2 of us. The difference is, I found out. She didn't respond. I hung up. After that, something shifted. Not in my routines, they stayed the same. But in my heart. Where there used to be knots, there was now space. I played more. I helped a friend open a recording studio. I even taught a few high school kids the basics of guitar. One afternoon, I visited the house. Ethan still lived there. He'd cleaned it up, replaced the porch boards, planted flowers in front. It looked like a home again. He invited me in for coffee, and as I stepped inside, I didn't feel any anger or regret. This place feels different, I said. He grinned. It's got a new spirit. I walked past the old fireplace, remembering how many nights I spent staring into it while Stephanie pretended we were fine. It didn't haunt me anymore. It just reminded me how far I'd come. I'm glad you have it, I told him. He nodded. You gave it to me. No, I said. I saved it. When I got home that evening, I found a package on my doorstep. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a CD, handwritten on the front. Us. It was Stephanie's voice. Old recordings. Snippets of songs we'd once written together, before the bitterness, before Lorraine, before Jason. Some were scratchy. Some were beautiful. At the bottom of the box was a note. I know I can't change the past. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I hope this reminds you that for a while, we made something good. S. I didn't cry, but I sat there for a long time, just holding the disc. She wasn't wrong. There had been a time when we built things together. Music, moments, memories. But somewhere along the way, she started tearing them down, and I started pretending not to notice. Now, I didn't have to pretend anything. I tossed the note in the trash, kept the CD, put it in a drawer, not to forget her, but to remember who I used to be, who I wasn't anymore. That weekend, I played another show. The bar was fuller this time. People were starting to come specifically for me. I didn't have a stage name. Didn't need one. I was just Frank. I ended the set with a song I hadn't played before. Something new. Something raw. It was about leaving, not in anger, but in clarity. About realizing that sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's moving on so completely that your absence burns more than your words ever could. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then came the applause. I looked out into the crowd and saw familiar faces. Strangers who had become regulars. Friends who once only knew me as that guy Stephanie married. Now, I was just me. It's strange how things come full circle. When Stephanie and I first moved into the house my father left me, I remember standing in the living room, looking at the blank walls, thinking we could make something beautiful together. A life, a legacy, but you can't build on sand. And our foundation had started cracking long before I noticed. I played my last set at the bar in early spring. The crowd had grown since the first show. There were people who knew my songs now, who mouthed the words quietly as I sang. Afterward, the bar manager offered me a regular slot. I thanked her but turned it down. I'd gotten what I needed from that place, a sense of self, a voice I'd buried under years of compromise. I didn't need the stage anymore to feel real. Instead, I focused on recording. A small label offered to help distribute my songs digitally. I didn't expect fame or money, but knowing that my music would be out there, that someone might listen and feel less alone, that mattered. It felt like justice in its own quiet way. One morning, while organizing boxes in my apartment, I found a framed photo tucked between old books. It was Stephanie and me, early in our marriage, smiling on a beach somewhere. I almost didn't recognize myself, not because of how I looked, but because of the way I was leaning toward her, completely open, hopeful, unguarded. I put the photo back in the box, didn't throw it out, just placed it away, let the past stay where it belonged. Later that week, Ethan called. He was hosting a small gathering at the house and asked if I'd come. At first, I hesitated, but I said yes. I didn't want to avoid my old life forever. I just didn't want it controlling me. The house looked better than ever. New paint, a few modern touches, the same bones, but with warmth it never had when Stephanie ran things. People mingled in the backyard, sipping drinks and laughing. A few neighbors I hadn't seen in years shook my hand, asked what I was doing now, told me I looked 10 years younger. As I stood near the garden, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. Stephanie. She looked older. Not aged, just worn. There was no makeup, no mask. Just her. And for the first time, I didn't feel anything sharp. No anger. No betrayal. Just a quiet detachment. Hi, she said softly. Hi. I didn't know you'd be here. Ethan invited me. I replied, sipping my drink. She nodded. The place looks good. It does. I saw your name pop up on a playlist the other day. You're doing well. I didn't respond to that. Let the silence hold steady. I just wanted to say thank you, she continued, for not ruining me when you could have, for not dragging my name through the mud. I gave her a long look. I didn't need to. She smiled faintly. No, you didn't. She stood there for a moment longer, then turned to leave. Before she walked away, I said, you ever think about why things really fell apart? She paused. All the time. I watched her go, disappearing into the party like a ghost fading into daylight. Lorraine wasn't with her. Jason wasn't either. Just Stephanie, alone, quietly existing in the aftermath of choices she couldn't undo. I finished my drink and wandered into the house. In the living room, the fireplace was still there. Ethan had added a new mantle, hung a few photos. The room was filled with laughter and light, the kind of energy that once felt impossible. Later that night, as I walked back to my truck, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. The house, my father's house, my house, stood firm against the night. It no longer belonged to me, not legally, not emotionally. And that was a good thing. I drove home in silence. No music, no distractions, just the hum of the road and the clarity of peace. When I got back to my apartment, I picked up my guitar, played a few chords. The song came easy, like it had been waiting for me to return. It wasn't about Stephanie, or Lorraine, or Jason. It was about freedom, about knowing when to fight and when to walk away, about finding your voice again in a world that tried to silence you. And as the final notes faded into the quiet of the room, I realized something. She thought she could take everything from me, my home, my pride, my peace. But she never understood one thing. I was never hers to break.